Very few people know about this memorial. Most simply walk past. And those that do notice it may not be entirely comfortable with its sentiment, because this memorial commemorates the lives of those determined not to fight, the conscientious objectors, or conchies, as they were popularly but not affectionately known. In this film, I'm going to investigate the lives of some of these men. And ask, 90 years on, were they cowards and shirkers? Or were they, in their own way, courageous for refusing to join the fight? In 1916, Parliament approved the Military Service Act, a radical piece of legislation, forcibly enlisting all unmarried men aged 18 to 41. The original act is kept at the Parliamentary Archives. It was pretty all-encompassing, though there were some exemptions. A, on the grounds that your job was in the national interest. B, on the grounds that if you were called up, your dependents would be destitute. C, on the grounds of your ill health or infirmity. And D, here it is, the unexpected one, on the ground of a conscientious objection to the undertaking of combatant service. The conscientious objector, as we know it, was born. 16,000 conscientious objectors applied for exemption. They fell into two categories. Those who refused to do anything to help the war effort, men known as absolutists, and those prepared to do non-combat work, alternativists. It's not widely remembered, but several thousand conscientious objectors served in non-combat roles at the front, as stretcher bearers on the battlefield, as labourers in a specially formed non-combatant corps, and as medics and orderlies. 18-year-old Cedric Vipont Brown was a Quaker, a member of the Society of Friends. He was morally opposed to war on religious grounds. In 1914, Cedric joined the Friends Ambulance Unit. It provided alternative service for those not prepared to fight. I'm meeting Cedric's daughter, Susan Hartshorn.
I have a picture here of the Friends Ambulance Unit at the training camp in Buckinghamshire in 1914, and there's my father in the middle of the front row. Yeah.
They do look like any other group of young men who've joined up.
Well, I don't think they were very much different from any other group of young men.
Over 1,000 men joined the ranks of the FAU. They may have worn uniforms, but the volunteers were very much civilians. They worked at the front, unarmed and unpaid. It was a dangerous task. Cedric himself was wounded and gassed while recovering casualties.
He'd never seen such carnage, and in fact, in his diary, he says so. The sight of some 15 badly wounded persons lying in a row in what used to be a stable is a sight I will never forget. It is war stripped of all glory, leaving its cruel, bloody and repulsive self.
It sounds as though the job required quite a lot of courage, which isn't necessarily what people would say, oh, conscientious objectors, they were trying to avoid it. That's not true.
I don't think that's true. I think he was a brave man, but then I wouldn't I?
Cedric served with the FAU for 4 years.
London's mad with excitement now. People rushing to join up.
When the Conscription Act was passed in 1916, uniquely in England, it gave conscientious objectors the legal right to refuse to fight. But every man who sought exemption from the ranks had to prove his integrity before a panel of local dignitaries, known as a tribunal. Towards the end of the interview, every conscientious objector was asked the killer question, designed to shame them out of their feebleness. What would you do if a German soldier attacked your mother? Would you stand up and protect her, or would you let her be raped and killed? Some men cracked and admitted they'd do anything to protect their family. Other men said it was an unfair question. But amazingly, the most hard-line conscientious objectors said yes, they would let their mother be killed rather than take another man's life. 26-year-old Bert Brocklesby was one of the very first men to apply for absolute exemption on conscientious grounds. As the national mood hardened, Bert's family received a white feather in the post, the traditional symbol of cowardice. But despite the stigma, they stood by him. In May 1916, Bert was ordered to work as a labourer in the Army's non-combatant corps, known derisively by fighting men as the No Courage Corps. But even this work was too militaristic for Bert. He refused to join up and was immediately arrested. This is Richmond in North Yorkshire, famous for its medieval castle. In 1916, the castle was used as a military prison, holding a group of 16 of the most determined conscientious objectors. Among them, Bert Brocklesby. The army tried to break Bert's resolve, constantly pressing him to sign up. In response, he and the other absolutists began a campaign of passive resistance. They refused to dress in uniform. They would not go out on parade. Bert even refused to peel potatoes. The prisoners were brought here, to the port of Boulogne in northern France, where thousands of troops were stationed before heading off to the Somme. Bert and the other prisoners were marched to the top of the cliffs overlooking the harbour, where an army camp had been set up. Here, in what is today a children's park, they faced a military court, charged with disobedience. On the 24th of June 1916, Bert Brocklesby was ordered into the parade ground, where hundreds of soldiers had gathered to hear the court's verdict. The captain read out the sentence of the court. The accused, he said, are found guilty and sentenced to death. Bert was one of at least 50 absolutists sentenced to death during the war. But none of the sentences were ever carried out. It was, in truth, a sham, pure theatre, an exercise in intimidation. Bert was transferred to Dice Work Camp near Aberdeen to begin a sentence of hard labour. The absolutists were often badly treated in prison. Many guards were unsympathetic former soldiers, and physical abuse of conchies was commonplace. 73 conscientious objectors died as a result of their punishment. Several committed suicide. The harsh treatment received by the absolutists still provokes conflicting reactions, from "that's terrible" to "so what?" Yes, Bert and his fellow COs suffered for their pacifist beliefs, but millions of men on the front line believed, or at least trusted, that their efforts would bring about peace in Europe. So how much sympathy do the absolutists deserve?